What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Other Side of the Firewall podcast. We talk about the latest and greatest in cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breakers, those people of color who made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. My name is Ryan Williams, and as always, I'm joined by Shan Tynes.
What's up? What's up?
And Daniel Acevedo.
How's it going, guys?
What's going on? So welcome to the podcast. Monday and Tuesday are topics. Wednesday discussion. Thursdays, Ask a CISSP. I have a really good one with Matthew Hill coming up. So he's a returning guest. We talk about Black History Month and just his tech and things he's doing within the space. And then Fridays, everything else. Movies, books, games, all that good stuff. But without further ado, I give it to Shannon.
All right, everybody. So this article is from darkreading.com, written by Robert Lemos. And the title of this one is U.S. Cybersecurity Efforts for Spacecraft are up in the air, right? So there's talk about kind of pulling back when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to different things that are related to space, right? So I don't like to see this, right? Like we talked about this before the current administration came on, and we're not getting into politics on this, but we talked about cybersecurity being something that we hope continues to be something that's concentrated on going forward. And this is just not a good sign of that, right? So what they're talking about here is that the cybersecurity, when it comes to like satellites, spacecraft, space navigation systems, things of that nature, there's gaps in cybersecurity for those things, right? Because it's one of those things where it wasn't taken into consideration like it should have been. Cybersecurity as a whole really wasn't taken into consideration like it should have been, but the gaps that are there, it seems like they're only going to get worse, right? So there's already been pushes to disband the National Space Council, apparently, and that's They were a group of experts that were established way back in George Herbert Walker Bush's administration, right? So that's going back, to the 80s, you know what I mean? And they developed policies and guidelines for the U.S. space programs, right? So the fact that cybersecurity is something that is something that we think we can be lax on is I don't want to say it's surprising, but it's something that I don't like to see, right? And I say this because this closely aligns with what I deal with in my everyday job, right? Like I work for a squadron that deals a lot with space. So to see this is kind of disheartening, and it's something that I know is needed from firsthand experience, right? And how things are dealt with. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be with the actual crafts themselves, right? Like the satellites or anything like that. But it could be with any systems that are used to support those, right? Like if you have cybersecurity issues there, like that's a problem, right? Because it could be, you have some type of vulnerability in the support systems that, keep you from actually doing that mission, right? And so everybody's trying to get into the space game, right? Everybody is, right? You got your Indias, your Chinas, your North Koreas even, right, that are trying to get into the space game. But they gotta, I don't like to see this being where they say they want to cut, right? Like I know the current administration is very big on cutting funding for different things. I don't think this should be where it is, right? Because this is definitely the future and not where to take it from. You know what I mean? But Daniel, what's your thoughts on this?
This one, yeah, it's a little depressing. I'll be honest. I'll just stay right there. And I'm usually the pessimist of the group and the fearmonger, like that the world's going to end. But it's a lot to unpack in an article, right? Because on one hand, he's not outright saying that they're going to cut funding, right, from this department, or that he's going to close departments down. Although the one major department that was in Bush's era, they're trying to pass legislation to close that one, which would be horrible. But hopefully that would be kind of where he stops. But he's also, there's no real governance from the government, right, to support this arena. And if you go back maybe 15 years, like the big spotlight was going to be, for 10 years, AI, space, and a couple other like leading technologies and industries, right? To say there's going to be less of a pathway from the government on how to regulate the cyber realm alongside that goes with the space area is kind of scary, because our adversaries and the rest of the world is going really fast in that direction as well. And it almost seems that if there's no clear communication, interagency, interdepartment, intergovernment, to kind of push this forward, and we're just going to leave it to everybody themselves, that's kind of the wrong direction you want to lead in regards to something as space, technology, IT, AI, cyber, these kind of things, right? I mean, if you go back way back, right? a lot of the innovations from even police work is because there's been better communications. Before, someone could have murdered somebody in this city or in this state, just drive 3 hours east, and they couldn't have caught him for like months and months or years afterwards, right? The technological advances that allowed better communication is really what developed that agency and that application, or that, I'm losing words here, but that ability to be more forward leaning to where the problems were. Space is no different. Now, you're going to say we're going to kind of not support it, kind of just leave it at its own thing. And then people will start developing, not parallel, but in each different way. That's not how you'd want a nation to grow a program. And we don't want to keep on privatizing or commercializing these kind of things, especially if it's for national defense or national forward thinking of whatever applications we have for the future. That's my big worry, right? Because even, NASA, they submitted a best practice guide in 2023, which is there, which agencies can use. Usually the government, these different departments and agencies look towards the government to set the standards. Hey, what are the standards? What are we following, especially when we come into cyber, right? How are we going to patch? What are the threats we're going to be looking for? New emerging threats. What should we be sharing information? How should we be sharing the information? What do we be worrying about? So it's a lot to unpack. I didn't land the plane as smoothly as I would like to, but it's kind of the way the Trump administration is looking at this as a priority is kind of where my mind is right now. I don't know what to align myself with because there's so many question marks going forward with this, which is not where you want to be with an application such as space, with these satellites that can see so much, with communication that can be so readily available and transmitted everywhere. Defending those things so people can't intercept it is just as important as you sending a text, right? These things need to be encrypted end to end. These need to be available, so forth and so on. But I'm going to keep on rambling here, Ryan. What are your thoughts on this one?
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, it is very disheartening, especially because a lot of these agencies and regulations are established because something went wrong or there's a threat of some sort, right? So with the potential disbandment of the National Space Council, you can already see a trend because you hire people based upon their expertise, right? So when you have, because I'm trying to stay out of politics, but still, talk about the space. When you have businessmen in charge of dismantling things, like taking things apart, they're going for cost-cutting measures. They're going for expediency. They're going for efficiencies. They're trying to figure out how can we cut corners best in order to produce more, make more, whatever be the case. That's their expertise. Like you don't hire businessmen to do things that are outside of business per se, right? They might have other interests and things of that nature, but in this case, it's not to protect people who might be impacted by these things or the environment. Like not to say like so the vacuum of space is everything's dead up there. So I'm not trying to say like save the space whales or something like that. However, there's a crap ton of debris up there. So like at one point we were trying to figure out like how can we collect this or bring it down to lower Earth orbit so it would burn off and things of that nature. But we just keep putting stuff up there. Like
Yeah.
like just SpaceX itself has put up so many different satellites, which to a certain extent are necessary, right? Like they're pushing more than half of space freight to space. But if you start to reduce regulation on them, they're going to get as much up there as possible and not necessarily care about future impacts, right? Like what's the current way to make the most money possible and to push whatever tech or whatever we want to happen as quickly as possible. That's what businessmen do. They're really like so are businessmen and women. Like when I want RAM to finally expand, I'm going to get one of these people on my team or my board and things of that nature because I want to make more, do more, have more resources. You don't do that in a space that should require scientists, right? Right? Like,
Or deals with national defense, right? Because
yeah, or deals with national defense. Like
let's be
you
honest
get
here, that's
experts to handle these matters because their mindset is not on necessarily making money. It's about how do I make the biggest, baddest weapon, the biggest, baddest policy to protect people. The biggest, like they're thinking like they're compartmentalized in that regard.
Yeah, because businessmen, they're almost always beholden to shareholders, right? And that's not how you have to treat this, right? The shareholders, so to speak, are the citizens of the United States, right? That's who you're there to protect, and they're not paying you more for it. They're not investing in a stock more for it, right? And this is like to the point that you're talking about there, Daniel, with what you were talking about earlier. I mean, I get what you felt like you were rambling, but you were making good points, right? Like there is a way to go about doing this. There's a
Thank
there's a
goodness.
mixture that can be had. Yeah, well, there's a mixture that can be had to where you can have contractors working with the government, right? But it
Yeah,
shouldn't go one way. It shouldn't go one way to where it's only contractors, right? Because then it's a matter of, okay, well, yeah, we'll provide the service, but you got to pay us more, right? Like we're a business, right? That's just how they operate. So yeah, I mean, you both made good points on that, and what really needs to be done with what we're doing here, I believe, right? So
Yeah, I just think it's going to cause future issues with deregulation of space. It's still a brand new frontier, though we've been there since the 50s and slightly earlier, right? However, it's a mess up there. Like, there's crazy amount of debris. We're always having to adjust our satellites and other space assets to make sure they don't collide with something. We just keep putting more and more crap up there. And then now the cyber security aspect of it, like what happens when someone hijacks a satellite or disrupts communications, like DDoS is a major provider or something to that extent. Or like you saw what happened with Russia when they invaded Georgia. They started with the cyber war first. What
yep.
happens if you could do that at a global scale? Because the assets are just not protected properly. Like the people who are currently trying to deregulate this space are just worried about how can I get as much crap up there as quickly as possible, not the future ramifications of it falling apart.
and I say this all the time: deregulation is no regulation. Like people talk about deregulation and they want deregulation. That means no regulation. It just leaves it open to be the wild, wild west and do whatever. And they, in turn, they're not thinking about the future. They're thinking about right now, right? So
Yeah, we
I'm
already
glad you
have
guys both said,
a Tesla
yeah,
floating around in space right now. Think
yeah,
about it.
that's true. Yeah, I'm just glad you guys both said what you said because I didn't want to bring conspiracy Daniel back out again because those are my thoughts also. But I'm like, I don't want to keep on poking the bear in that aspect. But if you read the tea leaves on this one, it kind of does jump out at you and kind of makes it seem that they want deregulation almost to push an initiative out of the businessman that's pushing that stuff happens to own one of the largest private uh, you know
Right. And
industries.
he's limited to
dealing
what he
with
can do
space.
because there's
Mhm.
regulation.
Exactly.
No, I can
Yeah.
push
So
way more crap up into space. All types of Tesla roasted.
just up there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just floating around, right? Or you keep misidentify them as comets. It's like, oh, it's a new asteroid. No, it's a car because somebody decided to push one into space. This is the world we live in, people. One day it's going to come back potentially. But yeah, just continue to tune into the podcast where we rant and rave about Teslas floating in space and other things that could potentially cause se- severe security issues in the future. Hit up all the websites that go by our name, the other side of Firewall, the other side of FW, or Ask a CISSP. Hit me up personally. I'm at RyRy Security Guy. That's RY Security Guy. You can find me pretty much everywhere, but LinkedIn is where I'm most responsive. Where can they find you, Daniel?
On LinkedIn under my name, Daniel Acevedo.
There it is. Stay safe. Stay secure.